Hey everybody, we are going to make a fun card tonight using some of the products from the Impressions Abloom Bundle. It's on the online exclusives. And everything I do, substitute what you have because I'm pretty sure you have some flower dies. I know you've got embossing folders, and we're going to run through this kind of quick. There definitely is some prep if you want to have the die cuts for your flowers, but that's the last thing that we're going to put on the card. So even if you don't have the die cut flowers done, you can put the card together really quickly. And in fact, this is kind of a thought of put some of the cards together, pretend that those flowers are not on there, and just have them in your stash. And then you can add the colors. You could put any kind of die cuts on the top and just have a really, really pretty design. So I'm going to run through, like I said, pretty quickly how to make this kind of card. It's just a little different. There's a technique that we haven't used in a while that we're going to, and I think you're going to like it. So I have done a lot of cutting and just pre-organizing. And I'm going to switch the colors up just a tad from the example, but a lot of it I'll keep the same. This is crumb cake, regular 8.5, 5.5, scored at 4.25. So it's just an A2 card base. And I decided this time on the card that I made, I used Highland Heather for the ink. This is Night of Navy for the sentiment. And then I've got blues and purples going on in here. I'm changing that up. In honor of the beautiful blues kit that we used last weekend, I'm going all blue in this next one that I'm going to do. So that means that the first layer that will be going onto the card base, this is Blueberry Bushel, a nice bright blue, and this measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. So it's just a teeny bit smaller than that card base. And I'm going to go ahead and I am going to attach this to the front of my card. We're just going to be layering up. And I just want to kind of get this out of the way. Now, I could have and probably should have die cut something from the middle because yes, I am using about a quarter sheet of cardstock, but I'll be honest, it was lying on my desk and I just happened to see it. I only needed to trim a teeny bit off. I'd used some of the blueberry bushel on another project, and this was just screaming at me, saying, please use me on another project. So I did. So we've got a teeny crumb cake border. Now we're going to build the front. And the first thing we're going to do is make an equivalent of this white piece. But again, I'm going to change up the color. So let's talk about what that is. You are going to start with a piece of white cardstock. And I just suggest that you start with something that is 5 inches by 4. So no, 5 1/4, excuse me, 5 1/4 long by 4 wide. And then choose an embossing folder that you want to use on the card. And it can be anything. The one that I'm using is Forever Plaid, and it is a 3D embossing folder. It's really nice. It's very forgiving. The lines are not completely straight. They're a little wonky, which is also fun. And run that piece through your embossing folder. So this is what I end up with. So it's just embossed. And now the fun begins. We're going to do a technique that's called direct to paper. And that is how I got the Highland Heather on this embossed piece. So what that simply means is I'm going to take an ink pad And I'm going to use Blueberry Bushel because I want to continue that blue theme. I'm going to go ahead and open up that ink pad. And I'm going to directly put ink on the paper by swiping the ink pad across the paper. And because that embossed piece is embossed and there are pieces that are higher, they're going to catch the ink. Now, when you do this, use a light hand. You don't want to do it really hard. You want to be light. Let me show you. So if I just drag that across, I get a really cool effect. And I can move the paper. The ink is going to dry fairly quickly. I'm going to drag it across again. And you can kind of fill in the blanks. And then if you want to switch the direction, I was going the long way. This time I'm just going to go the short way. And you'll notice that there's some places where the white that is not embossed is starting to get some color, which I like, and it's very random. So it's nothing that is going to be replicated again and again. If I got another piece and I did the same thing, it would not look the same. Every single time you're going to get something different, which is also very fun. But it's quick. I mean, that's done. That front piece is done. And if I wanted to, I could even go back and add a second color and press maybe a little bit harder when I get into the areas that are white and put a second color in there as well. It is probable that this is dry, but I'm going to move on to the next piece because I'm just going to set this aside, and we're now going to work on the piece that will be the background for the flowers. And if you notice, it's a little hard to see on camera, this is also embossed. And it is embossed with a new embossing folder. This is quickly becoming one of my favorites. It's called Damask Designs. This is not a 3D embossing folder. So when you emboss with this one, you're going to need to put the two plates that you normally would when you're running an embossing folder through versus the one that I showed you before, the 3D embossing folder. This is thicker intentionally because it's going to give you a little bit deeper embossing. For this one, you use a top plate only, and that top plate is a little bit thicker than the ones you use to do your traditional embossing. If you have any questions on that, just let me know because I can point you to how to do that. So this is where I'm going to show you a couple of dies that come in the Impressions Abloom die set. And there are quite a few dies. These two ovals are really fun and interesting. You've got one oval, this one, that cuts. So it cuts the oval shape. And I ran that through some crumb cake. So if you run one of the dies, and you can tell by looking at the back because it has a blade only, you get a really nice oval. If you use the other die, and you can tell the difference here because there's some dots, and you're going to cut on the inside and you're going to cut on the outside. So when you do that, that die gives you an oval. It's a little bit smaller than the one that I showed you first. And then you get a really cool outline that also has some stitching around the edge. What is nice about this is you can use different colors. So it is now very obvious that I used the die that cuts the trim around the outside of the oval to create this. And I ran it through my die cutting machine, and I got a equivalent white in the oval. And then I ran it through with the crumb cake, and I got the outside edge, and I also got the oval. So I ran it through 2 times and I got 2 sets, one oval, one outline in crumb cake, and then one oval and one outline in basic white. And I'm just going to switch the colors so that here we've got the white and the crumb cake outline. The one that I'm going to do right now, I'm switching that out a little bit. I'm going to reverse the colors because I had colors left. So when I bring those pieces back, you're going to see that I'm going to be using a crumb cake oval and a white outline. I just thought it'd be kind of fun to see what that looks like. So this is playing. I haven't even put this together yet. So we're just going to flip the colors. I also am going to run the oval piece, regardless of what color I choose, through my embossing folder. And the reason is I just want to have a little bit of texture on that oval. And what I did is if you look at this oval piece, there are sides where the shape is straight. So it's not a completely true oval. And on Stampin' Up! Embossing folders, there is a line that will show you if something is straight. So I decided that I was going to put my piece in and use that straight edge as sort of a guide. And I got that straight edge right up against that line. And then simply put that through my embossing machine. And through the magic of being prepared, I have a piece that is embossed. Now you've got choices here. You can do some direct to paper if you wanted to. Tone on tone might look really cool, doing a little bit of crumb cake on top of a crumb cake piece of paper. I'm going to leave this simply with the embossed design on what I'm going to do, because again, I'm sort of mimicking the way that I put the first card together. So I have 2 more pieces and I can, again, kind of start building this card from the bottoms up. So I'm going back to the piece that I did the direct to paper inking, and I'm making sure that I know how the card is opening, because the next major decision that I have is to figure out if I want to put the piece that I did the direct to paper in this orientation or in this orientation. And the factor that is going to play into this for me is I will be putting this oval over here. So for me, I want more of the color where I have the color in the white areas. I want that to show. And if I put it this way around, a lot of that color is going to get hidden by the oval. So I'm just going to flip it over. And I can go ahead and add this directly on now. Now, one thing I always do if I have a piece of paper that's been embossed and I'm going to use liquid glue, I always put a little bit extra in the corners, and it's kind of a little swirl. And that, in my mind, whether it's working or not, is going to help tack down this piece, because there are nooks and crannies that are now involved in this piece of paper that may or may not get a nice bit of glue. And I still have the ability to move this around and try and get it centered. Now, the one really interesting thing I find with embossing folders is when you start off with a piece of paper, and remember this started as 4 wide by 5 1/4 long. When you emboss paper, the paper is going to shrink a little bit because you're pushing on the paper. You're disfiguring the paper. So it's not going to be exactly 4 inches by 5 1/4 anymore, but it should fit around that border pretty well. Okay. So let's kind of peek at where we are and where we're going. You're going to notice that there is a sentiment. And that sentiment visually only shows on the left side of the card, but it's actually a piece that goes all the way over to the other edge. And I'm going to put that on next because if you look at the layers, that comes next, and then we're going to put the oval on and keep building. So the sentiment is from the Impressions Abloom stamp set. The stamp set is gorgeous. It is a two-step stamp set, and I'm going to be using the two steps on a project soon. I'll be creating with these stamps, but the stamp that I used is thanks. And what I wanted to do was just create a very, very simple little banner that would fit over the card. So this piece is 1 inch high and it's 4¼ inches wide. And it's 4¼ inches wide because that is the exact measurement of the front of the card. And all I'm going to do here is figure out kind of where I want it. It really doesn't matter. You know, eventually I'll put this piece on. So I could get really particular with it, but it really doesn't matter. You don't need to measure where you're going to put it. And I'm just going to go ahead and attach that. And you'll see that that should go all the way from one side to another. I'm triple checking that that is the open side. And I'm just going to tack that on. Whenever I do something like that, what I like to do to get it sort of straight is I'm just going to hold it so that that piece on the bottom, I'm tapping this piece on the table, and I'm just trying to get it so that it's right butted up against that edge. And then you can do a real quick burnish. The color that I used to stamp this is actually Night of Navy. I could have used the Blueberry Bushel, but I wanted that blue to really, really stand out. I think it would have been fine with the Blueberry Bushel, but I did do that with Night of Navy. Okay, next thing we're going to do, we're going to add our embossed oval. And I'm going to allow mine to hang over the edge. I just think this is fun. I think it adds a very interesting sort of design so that you're not seeing the entire oval, you're imagining it, that it is an oval. And it shows it off, I think. So again, I'm not going to get really crazy about where I'm putting this, but what's kind of nice about this embossing folder is there are sort of lines that are kind of straight. So I can use the lines that are in the embossing folder that I have inked up as a little bit of a guide. And what is important is that I just put that down where I want it. And I'm going to raise that. I'll raise it up just a little bit. So I'll put it about right here, something like that. And again, I'm just going to use glue. Now, I don't know exactly where the edge is going to be on the right, so I may get a little bit more glue on this side than I need, but it's okay because we're actually going to cut that off. So I'm going to turn it this way because that will give me that visual. And I'm going to hold this here and just kind of get it sort of maybe straight. I'm also looking at the angle on my sentiment. I do notice that I got a little bit of ink down on there, but I don't care because we're going to be adding some die cut flowers and I bet I can hide that if I want to. And I did get some glue a little bit outside the lines, but that's fine. So I'm going to burnish that. Now I want to trim the edge of that die cut. And the way that I like to do that is anytime you trim, do it from the back. I can't see the edge of the card from the front. So I'm going to turn that just right over. I probably am going to get a little bit of glue on my scissors, but such is life. And I'm just going to cut that right at the edge. And there may be one area, because remember, we actually added that sentiment piece as well. So there's going to be one area of when you're cutting where you're going to feel like, oh my goodness, it's a little harder. It's because you have that sentiment piece that was also right over at the edge, and it may get in the way. I'm going to just take that piece that I cut off because it's got glue, and I'm going to anchor it down here. I'll end up tossing this piece of paper. All right, next we want to add our frame. And this is the frame, you'll remember, that came from that die cut. And I want to put it kind of like that. So my suggestion is reversible tweezers. Love these. And again, I know that I'm going to be tossing this piece of construction paper. I'm just adding a teeny bit of glue, if my glue cooperates. And I'm going to kind of dab this off because I don't want it to come out from underneath. So I'm going to put this on and I will get some glue that is going to be extra, but that's okay. And I'll go ahead and just kind of dab that off a little bit. And you can see that was a smart idea because there would have been glue that would have dabbed off where I don't want it on the card. And then I'm going to come over, and with these tweezers, I have the ability to move that piece around and finagle it in where I want it to be without getting my hands dirty, without feeling that I only have a couple of seconds to get it where I want it to be. And I'm just placing that right around that oval. And then just like I did for the piece that's hanging over for the oval, I'm going to turn this over and I'm going to cut off the edges of the trim piece that we've got. And this is super simple, obviously, because you've got just a little bit right there. And then I can move my scissors and I've got a little bit right there. And I bring that back around and it looks like it's intentionally right on the side. Now, I know myself well enough that if I don't do something about this glue at this point, it will become a disaster. So I'm going to fold that up, and I still have construction paper that I can work with, but I don't have any fear that I'm going to get glue where I don't want it to be. And then you have your palette, your template, your canvas, whatever you want to call it. And it's going to be a little bit different than the one I did here. I used a lot of the dies from the Impressions Abloom. They are fun. They're very easy to use. There are some that are two pieces for the flowers. So on the outside, you can cut the flower shape. The inside gives you an embossed image. It actually will emboss, not cut. And what I chose to do, because I was cutting a lot of these, is I just washi taped them together and ran them through my die cutting machine. There is another larger flower that I didn't use in the set, and this is for the inside of the flower, the yellow center. Some leaves that are on a stem, and then a couple of individual leaves. These are stems. I ended up not using those in this design, but I cut out some anyway. But you will find that there are a lot of uses for those. You can either cut out the stamps after you have stamped the images, or you can use them just as die cuts. And what I also did, and I will fix this, I'll make sure that that is not popping up. What I also did is when I was die cutting, I used two-tone cardstock. It was a lot of fun. And you'll see when we do the green that there are two tones of the green. I'm spreading this glue around rather than squirting it on there to try and make sure that it is where it needs to go without getting a lot. But the two-tone cardstock is really nice. It comes in, I believe, almost all the colors that Stampin' Up! Has. And take a look at this. This is the same two-tone green, but if you flip the paper over, you definitely get two colors. You can see here's one color and here's the other. So I was able to use the two-tone paper, and you can see it's packaged, it's 12 by 12. And that was one of the pieces that I cut, and I simply just flipped it over and I got two different hues of the green. And this is garden green that I'm using. So all I'm going to do here, and yes, I can hide that. I knew I would be able to. I'm going to use what I normally don't. And I'm just going to put a couple of glue dots. And I'm putting them where the image is a little thicker. And I will put those down. And I'm going to do two of the long multi-stemmed leaves. Again, I'm going to use my reverse tweezers because this, again, it gives me just an opportunity to get things where I want. And then I'm going to press it down. And I'm going to do two different greens. I'm just going to pull these in. I'll hide the areas that are overlapping with some flowers. And I'm just trying to make sure that the greens are inside the card, that I'm not putting them on the outside of the area of the card, because then obviously they're not going to fit into any kind of envelope. And by the way, if you did not know, the price of a first class postage stamp went up on Sunday, and it is now 78 cents. Hopefully you have some forever stamps in your house. I went to our post office over the weekend, and in our area, I live in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, there have been some pretty horrendous flooding incidents lately. And a couple of the local post offices were actually closed. One in particular had mail that had been delivered to the post office, ready to go on Monday morning. The storm came in on a Sunday night. And on Monday morning, the plan was that, the trucks would be loaded with the pieces that needed to be delivered, and they would be delivered. Well, Mother Nature had another idea because the post office was flooded and there was quite a bit of mail that was literally destroyed. And apparently it was sitting in mud. So I hope that there were not a lot of folks who were impacted with, Social Security checks or things like that. But anyway, that's how I was reminded when I went to the post office that the first class mail had gone up, and definitely a significant increase. I'm not going to do all of these because it will get a little repetitive, but I'm going to show you how I created some of the flowers. The piece that I'm using right now is the inside of the flower. And again, I cut that out using two-tone cardstock. And I use Lemon Lolly. I thought it would be a fun, bright, but not really, really bright yellow. And then these are also made out of two-tone cardstock. These were made from Night of Navy. So this is Night of Navy one side, Night of Navy the other side. And this is made with Blueberry Bushel one side, and this is the other side. So it's just really fun that you have two options of color. And the paper itself is a little bit thinner than regular cardstock. So even if you're layering it up like this, the layers are not going to be as thick. as if you were creating with cardstock. And I just think it's fun. It's just a little bit different, something new to kind of play with.
Lori,
The
is
Yeah,
can you get that paper in like all the colors in one pack, or you have to buy the individual packs?
to my knowledge, and I will look it up in the
No, you don't
catalog.
have to. If you don't know, that's okay. I just thought I'd
I
ask.
think it's just, yeah, it's a great question. I believe the way I bought it anyway is you get 10 sheets of 12 by 12 and it's by color.
Yeah, okay.
And it's actually pretty reasonable. I think it was 10 sheets for, no, 12 sheets. Let me look. It was either 10 or 12 sheets and I think it was $10. So, they're pretty reasonable. And they do last quite a while, at the 12 by 12. But
Same
I
holds true for the in colors. You have to get them individual, I guess.
I believe, and I'm going to look it up in 2 seconds because I need to know the answer to that as well. Um, but yeah, and what's nice about them too is that Stampin' Up! Cardstock, typical cardstock, is the same color all the way through, whereas the two-tone has a white core. So if you rip it, you see a white core. And that can be really useful if you want to do some designs where you do rip the paper or you can sand the paper. Think about if you take a piece of the two-tone cardstock and maybe you run it through an embossing folder and you sand it. So where you sand it and it's been embossed, you're going to see the white core. So it's just a different way to use it. I'm adding now, you can see I'm just adding some of the individual leaves that I die cut. And again, I've got two different colors and I'm just sort of tucking those in underneath just to give a little bit more interest. And I'm not going to finish all of this. I just wanted to show you a little bit of what I'm doing here. And I'll come back in and I'll add maybe a couple more glue dots just to make sure that everything stays in place. But you can add as much as you want. I've got a couple more leaves that I will add. And then what I wanted to do is give it a little bit of zhuzhing up. And I decided on this card, I'm going to use the adhesive back sparkle gems and just put a little bit of kind of sparkle. So these are nice and festive. They're gold and silver and black. And I'm gonna put those where they will draw the eye to some of the different colors that are going on. And then I'm gonna save one because what I'm also going to do is add a little bit of twine. And I know I really like twine. I think it just adds a nice little touch. And on this kind of design, for me, it was one where I didn't need to worry about exactly where I put the twine, because if I tuck it in somewhere and make it look like it's purposeful, it will blend in with the background. And I don't want that entire dot to look like a dot, so I'm just going to squish it up a little bit, and that way it will be more like a part of the knot on the back of that bow. So it's just a double bow with twine. And then the last thing I'm going to do is add a gem right on the bow, the middle of the bow, and give that a little extra. The gems that I used on the other are the purple gems. So I'm going to get all of this mess out of the way. I think I have, oh, I do. I have a purple piece. So we can stick them on purple and just sort of see the similarities and the differences. I will go back and I'll add a little bit more to this one with a couple more leaves tucked here and there. But for all intent and purpose, that's the card. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Different color combination with the white versus the crumb cake. Obviously the same crumb cake here, so you get, you're still tying it all together. And then a big difference with blueberry bushel for the direct to paper versus this one was Highland Heather, and it was the exact same technique. So it's a really fun card, I think, and I think pretty quick and easy. Grab an embossing folder. You don't need to commit to what you're putting on the front until you've played around with your direct to paper, and just have fun with it. It's really fun. And you can put any kind of dies that you already have in your stash on the front. So I hope you liked it. I hope you will give it a shot, and I would love to see what you make.